Good evening, everyone. It's so good to be with you, to see your faces here tonight, competing with the World Cup and everything, but you are here. Thankfully, the U.S. doesn't play till a little later. My name is Betty Cruz, and I'm the president and CEO of the World Affairs Council of Pittsburgh. It's been my privilege to serve in this role for over 6 years now, and to be here with you tonight as we celebrate 95 years of the World Affairs Council of Pittsburgh this year. Thank you. Tonight's program on tariffs, trade, and what's at stake is part of Civic Futures, a year-long series we designed to explore how democratic societies endure in a time of global pressure and domestic division. Economic stability or volatility is central to this conversation. I'd like to thank our co-hosts for tonight's program, the District Export Council of Western Pennsylvania, the German-American Chamber of Commerce, Pittsburgh chapter, Performance Review Institute, and Business France. And thank you to the Heinz Endowments for their support of our Civic Futures series. Now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Susanne Cook to provide a policy briefing before we jump into our panel conversation. Susanne is a senior partner and chairs the Dentons, Cohen & Grigsby International Business and Trade Team. She splits her practice between counseling businesses on traditional U.S. export controls and customs matters, as well as quickly evolving trade sanctions and trade sanctions imposed under various regimes, including tariffs and restrictions. And Susanne also counsels companies on international and domestic transactions. She has received numerous accolades throughout her career, and most recently was named International Trade and Finance Law Lawyer of the Year in Pittsburgh by Best Lawyers. With that, I'd love to turn it over to Susanne.
Thank you, Betty, I barely recognized myself with this description. Anyway, I am delighted to be here tonight to just give the tariff, trade, and what's at stake policy statement and overview. There is a lot to talk about here, as you can imagine. I've been doing this for decades, but this is a particularly busy time for anybody working in this area in trade. It's in a way exciting at the same time. It can also be exhausting, trust me. I will talk about the current tariff and trade regime, but I find it particularly helpful to look at it in a historical way. It actually grounds me too. When I'm upset about something and looking back at history, it's not that novel as it feels. And so it's been very helpful to me. Believe it or not, Customs is the oldest agency in the United States, and it was passed with the second bill by U.S. Congress in 1789. The 1789 Tariff Act was passed, and it was initially the sole source of revenue. And so when we're talking about revenue, again, today, it's not historically viewing this, it's not that novel. The IRS was actually just formed July 1, 1862, to fund the Civil War. So about 80 years, Customs was it. There were some other revenue sources, but it was really about the most significant source of revenue. So historically, there are like 3 eras of tariff treatment. So this is called the revenue era. So it was just for 80 years, revenue. Then the next one was the restriction era from 1861 to 1933. And the restriction era, we see some of that again too today, is to protect U.S. businesses from imports and build up a tariff wall to accomplish that. And that was followed by the reciprocity era, which was rung in with the Reciprocity Trade Agreement Act of 1934. And what that act did, it expanded the executive's power over tariffs. So the president was given the authority to increase or lower tariffs. He could negotiate trade agreements, was awarded to the president, and really, which is a technical thing, but I think it was very, very important, the most favored nation concept was implemented. So what that means is if lower tariffs were awarded to one nation, similarly situated, other countries would receive the same treatment. And it's what we call in the tariff, customs tariffs, the column 1 rate, which is the most favored nation rate. And it significantly had the effect of reducing tariffs. The idea was the freer we trade, the less the nation and the folks and the businesses that are best at doing what they do will prevail. There are no artificial customs barriers. And it did have that effect. I've been doing this for a year, for a while, and I won't tell you how long, but I remember when I first started working in this era, it was not unusual to have customs rates still of 7, 8, 9, 10%. Then over even my lifetime now, they've come down, and the rate 1 often was 0, 1%, 2%. So you can really see how the rates were reduced significantly and trade was increased. We now have a little bit of a backlash because, yes, trade was very, very free. And now we're as a policy, looking at that again and determining that no, we're back to higher tariffs, as you know, and it's implemented in a very novel way too. And we'll go over the handout that you have in a little bit, but there are these policy changes come by tweet. They come by, it used to be the Federal Register was the source of our news. No longer. And it's hard, it's exhausting to keep up with this. And also executive orders, one executive order after the other, and sometimes contradicting executive orders in a couple of month period, back and forth. And there's just a lot to absorb. Even we do this all day long. Sometimes I get confused. It's like, okay, what's the current status on this? Because it changes all the time. And we use statutes that are in existence in a different way. All the time. Like the most famous one everybody knows about, the IEEPA tariff, the International Emergency Economics Power Act. I've worked with that statute forever. We also do export control, and it's the source, for example, of all the Iranian sanctions that we hear in the news. The Iranian assets that were seized, they were seized under IEEPA. That's the statute that gives the president the authority to do that. To now apply this to tariffs had never been done before. And as we all know, the Supreme Court did not agree with that and deemed it unlawful. And we have a pretty big mess right now with our recovery of the tariffs because it's not uniformly handled. only some of the tariffs are currently eligible to be receive refunds through CAPE. And it more has to do with, I believe, the customs ability to handle the refunds rather than who's eligible and who is not. At the end of that chain, we just had this, CAPE 2 was announced yesterday, and another bunch of tariff or entries are now eligible for the refund. At the end, I'm wondering if there will be some lawsuits again of some entries that are deemed ineligible, but we will see when we get there. Let me just summarize some other, principles from a policy perspective. Generally, what we see is a definite increase in tariffs, and that's. Many businesses tell me they don't really mind the increase in tariffs. What they mind is that there's no predictability. There is no planning. Like, for example, if you have a capital project to build a factory here, and because there are very high tariffs and imports are unlikely with that amount of tariff, well, if you don't know whether this system will still be in place a year from now, that makes it difficult to plan. And I think part of it is that this is a policy as well, to keep other countries off guard, to always be on edge. I think it's a negotiation tactic. The flip side of it is it keeps U.S. businesses a little bit off guard too, and not knowing how to plan. I call it the policy of change. It's all the time. Now, one of the things that never ceases to amaze me with all of these changes, and this is where we get to your handout, really not that much has changed. Basically, we're relying on 3 statutes that have been, the oldest one is 1930, the Tariff Act of 1930, which basically formed the current customs. Oh, okay. Is this better? Yes. Okay, good. I apologize. Which forms the basis of our current customs laws. And it is also the basis for anti-dumping duties. And it is, very interesting, the basis of forced labor. So when we talk about keeping goods out of the country that were manufactured by forced labor, this concept has been on the books since 1930. This is not novel. I was surprised the first time I remember as a young attorney when I saw it. I never came across a case, I can tell you, till recently, even though there was no reason not to enforce it, but it just was not enforced. And now, when you look on the right side, I put a bunch of laws that are recent. This is the only recent column in here, and they are all forced labor kind of statutes, making increasing penalties, making it easier to investigate, dealing with the kind of proof that you need to allege forced labor, and tell me it's not a whole, I can tell you it's not a whole lot. Basically, when an allegation of forced labor is made, that case is almost impossible to win for the importer. That's how the laws are stacked at this point. Then the other act, the second column, is the Trade Act of 1974. And it is the basis of the Section 301. And we've always had Section 301, which is national security measures imposed to protect the United States and make it secure. It also is it's the unfair trade, which we use against China. China has always traded in an unfair way, And so most of the Section 301 historically, or the last 10 years, measures have been targeting China. Now, this is about to change because we have a new investigation on forced labor and a new investigation of structural excess capacity, which is alleged against 10 countries. So, yes, stay tuned. We will see, particularly under the forced labor, significant additional tariffs and against 60 countries. So that's pretty much everybody. The next statute that's always been around is the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, and this is the one dealing with national security. And Section 232, you've probably heard about the steel tariffs, the automobile tariffs. There are all kind of additional investigations, pharmaceuticals. It feels like everything is under a blanket of some kind of investigation and could be subject to these additional tariffs at any moment. Now, you would think with that there is some predictability, but no, because there are exceptions. And these exceptions, they swoop in just like the tariffs. You get another announcement, and these types of machineries are excluded. There are agricultural exceptions. There are HTS exceptions, and it can, you win or you lose. It's very dynamic. Now, let me give you a little bit more of an overview here. What are the other additional policy changes? One thing, and this is not new either, Customs has always had penalty provisions. The IRS would dream to have only half the penalty provisions that Customs has. And what we see more and more, they're being enforced. 20 years ago, there was a real decline in enforcement. Now we see a drastic increase. And we used to, in my team, we used to joke and say, if we were just enforcing the customs laws, we can deal with our deficit. But yes, we're getting there. There's much, much more enforcement. It makes us much more busy. And I don't see that going away. On enforcement of folks who try to circumvent, Section 232, 301s, there is a lot of cross-shipment allegations, forced labor, you name it. Now, this is also very transactional, and it feels a little bit like a negotiation all the time, and that's how the policies are drawn. And there's also sometimes what appears to be favors given to companies who, like ArcelorMittal. I'm just, repeating here certain news articles where, a donation of steel had the effect of lower tariffs that benefit the donor. Bigger companies, unfortunately, seem to have more tools, and we deal with a lot of smaller or mid-sized companies, and they just don't have the same opportunities. And it strikes me, I'm a fairness person. It's a little bit unfair, but that's the current game. And I've never in my life talked to lobbyists until about a couple of years ago. It is a growing field, and that's part of where we are. Now, what's at stake? My final remarks. I think we are in a place where we are seeing a reorganization of the world as we knew it. And it's like every time when you're in the middle of something, we don't know where this is headed either. I don't know where this is headed. Other than, old alliances are often still there, but they're not as predictable and not to be counted on. Like everything is transactional, more short term. There are some things that are stable, which is China is always a target. That's is one predictable element. Other elements, it's really by the day. Again, I think looking back, I couldn't wait to kind of look back on this and see where is all of this ending, because of course there will be predictability looking back, but right now being in the middle of it, it sometimes is a little unsettling. Well, and with that, I introduce Marie. Or you.
No problem. If everyone can join me thanking Susanne for her remarks. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I'm glad that you're going to be sticking around to join our panel. The format is, you've heard the policy briefing, very, very high level, as much as we can pack in briefly, but there's going to be enough time to be in conversation, and I'll introduce Marie in a moment, and she'll facilitate that, and then there's going to be time for questions to hear from you. So the panelists and Susanne, who will be joining, can unpack further some of what we just started to scratch the surface on. Now I get to turn it over to our moderator for tonight's conversation, Marie Batz Martin. Marie is an accomplished legal, compliance, and business executive with more than 20 years of experience advising global companies on governance, risk, international operations, and cross-border business strategy. Most recently, she served as Chief Compliance Officer of Coherent Corporation, a Pittsburgh region technology and manufacturing company with operations in more than 40 countries. Marie is also a member of the Board of Directors of the World Affairs Council of Pittsburgh and serves on our executive committee. Please join me in welcoming Marie and our panel to the stage.
Okay, well, thank you, Betty, for that lovely introduction. And on behalf of the Board of Directors of the World Affairs Council, I'd like to thank Betty and Brian and their teams for all the hard work that they do to put on this programming for our region. You've heard a little bit about me and, of course, Susanne. So before we start, I'd like to ask our panelists, Brandon and Mike, to quickly introduce themselves. We're really lucky to have them here tonight because they're boots on the ground. They're inside of international organizations, and they can talk to you about what's really going on, sort of amidst the chaos, if you will, both here in the United States and in factories and overseas locations. So with that, Brandon.
Thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me tonight to speak to everyone. My name is Brandon Friez. I'm the Senior Vice President of Global Logistics and Supply Chain Intelligence at American Eagle Outfitters. I've been with AEO for 25 years and have worked in numerous roles across e-commerce, across supply chain, across finance, and across strategy.
Awesome. And I'm Mike Zerega. I'm the Director of Global Strategic Sourcing for Komatsu Mining Technologies. So not as well known as American Eagle probably in the room, but most of the time when I say construction equipment and you see on the side of the road yellow, big blue Komatsu on the side, excavators, bulldozers, you think of that. So I work in the mining division for them. So we, on a mining standpoint, are about neck and neck with Caterpillar as the 1 and 2 largest mining manufacturing companies in the world. They're roughly $12 billion in revenue on the mining side, which is about half of Komatsu's business. And the Komatsu Mining Technologies Group is a heavily North America-focused manufacturing company that makes up about half of Komatsu's mining business. So we are about a quarter of the overall revenue there and half of the mining business. So I look after the global strategic sourcing for them. So Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you. So we'll dive right in. Brandon, American Eagle, as we all know, is a major global retailer here in the region, and you have deep sourcing roots in Asia. I know you've been dealing with tariffs for decades. This isn't new. But when the new tariffs started hitting in 2025, can you talk to us about what immediately started to change in your organization and where you are today and how you're carrying those changes forward so that you can react and pivot more quickly?
Definitely. Well, first, people were asking, what are tariffs? That was like the number one question we got at first because, although American Eagle Outfitters is one of the largest taxpayers or one of the largest tariff payers in the country, not many people know that. We pay on average, prior to the Trump tariffs, 17% on apparel. So that's not so on a $10 item, $1.70 of that is going to be tariffs. So when these tariffs got announced, you're looking at a doubling. So that went from 17 to roughly 36% for us. I'll take it back to maybe a little bit when the election happened because we were sitting around and we were like, well, what do we know is going to happen? And you mentioned it. One of the things we first said is we know that there's going to be tariffs and we know that it's going to hit China. So we'd been on a diversification strategy for multiple years. So at one point we were 90% in China. We had since kind of built a strategy to kind of diversify that not any one country would be greater than 20% of our supply chain. So when the tariffs were announced, there was a little bit of, oh my God, there's nowhere to run type of a situation. But what we had done is, strategically, we immediately pulled together a SWAT team. So that's pulling together cross-functional partners from legal, from compliance, from strategy, from technology, analytics, to be able to be prepared because what we knew was this was going to be evolving. But that was kind of the immediate things. And then we began to scenario plan. So we said, well, what is the impact of this? Mm-hmm. And the grounding force was, at the end of the day, it was about a $2 change per item. So we really had to think about what we were going to do differently.
Thank you for that. We did the exact same thing at Coherent. But these are big organizations, and I'd like to ask Susanne a couple questions. I had the privilege of sitting in an office next to Susanne for a few years at the law firm. And this was several years ago, and she was very busy, even back then, on 232, 301, and advising, as she said, smaller and sort of mid-sized international and domestic companies here in Pittsburgh. So Susanne has a little bit of a broader lens. And so what does it look like on the ground for these smaller companies that don't have as many resources as bigger organizations like Coherent and American Eagle, who can pull together SWAT teams and have the resources to implement technology to ensure compliance? What does it look like for most of the world?
They're really taken by surprise. And sometimes to the point they don't realize the situation they're in till they get the customs bill. And then, there's a lot of backpedaling. And sometimes, yes, we find ways to assist them. But in other times, there's just nothing that can be done. And these tariffs are designed to not be circumvented. So some of the tools that we used to have are no longer there. For example, on the Section 232, there used to be a process where you could say, but I'm the only nobody in the United States produces this product. I'm not harming anybody. And here are the benefits to the U.S. economy, and make your argument to get an exception. Those tools are no longer available. And it makes it very difficult for those companies. And they are diversifying, but they didn't have often the foresight that a lot of bigger companies have.
So as you advise them now, I'm interested, they were caught by surprise, like probably didn't even have their classifications done, didn't understand tariffs, none of that. How have you advised them to be prepared going forward, and be ready to go, as the dynamic continues to shift in the world?
again, the resources are more scarce,
Yeah.
right? And so, yes, we do advise diversification of supply chain, know your supply chain, know the factories, go visit them, go and see if there's anything that looks like forced labor. But again, having less resources, they pick the bigger companies, but it's a little bit harder for them to move.
Yeah. Well, moving back to sort of the bigger company environment, Komatsu is one of the world's largest manufacturers of construction and mining equipment, as Mike shared with us. And while you assemble your products here in the U.S., many of your subcomponents, if you will, are sourced overseas. So what has this meant for your business? And did you prepare in advance, or were you able to do scenario planning like American Eagle as soon as the election was settled?
So the number one thing that I did was add cost to the equation. So as Susanne was touching on it, in a lot of places, even if we had the desire to completely abandon our global supply chain and source everything in the United States to mitigate tariffs, the cost wasn't going to go away. So what we often say to our president and CEO is, I can mitigate 100% of your tariffs and your cost is going to go up 10% from it. Is that what you really want, right? So what it forced us to do is have a better understanding of the pockets of the world that our supply chain is located in, those core areas. And we live by an acronym of SLQDC at Komatsu, and it stands for safety, law, quality, delivery, cost. That's how we make every sourcing decision. That's how we've done it for years and years and years. And you can tell by that cost is the last step of that equation. We can't abandon the quality and delivery that we've spent 10 or 15 years developing, especially in an uncertain trade environment, right? So it added cost to that equation. We got a much better understanding from our existing supply chain, which for the most part is heavily focused in the formerly NAFTA, now USMCA areas of the world, into China. And then we also have pockets of supply chain in our operating regions in Australia, South Africa, Europe, and India. We had to understand which of those countries' total landed cost into the U.S. and start making our sourcing decisions and our regional location decisions more on what is that overall country's benefit, and start ranking countries into the U.S. instead of suppliers. And so when we did that, especially for our heavy fabrications, our castings, our forgings, our big expensive things that were the primary products that we outsourced overseas, we started to understand, okay, China used to be our lowest cost source for these products. Now it's moved into Mexico. Mexico was our lowest cost source. And then a new tariff policy would come. We would rerun the calculation and say, oh, with this one, actually, Europe is maybe a little bit more attractive if it's coming from our UK plant. So hammer the UK button, and then the policy would change. And then, oh, well, now we're back to Mexico. So bring Mexico back in, but we need to have a better understanding of where their raw material components are coming from, because Mexico's the lowest if it's using US steel in that product. We have to make sure our suppliers can drive with that. And then you deal with the market dynamics of those steel manufacturers knowing, hey, there's now a big market down in Mexico. I can raise my prices on all of that to level it all out. So we did chase it. We mitigated it for a little, but the main thing we didn't do was walk away from our existing supply chain. We just used it a little bit differently, and that's the mindset that we've had going forward. For our customer base, when it came to tariffs, the bad thing, sometimes good thing when the market's taking off with mining, is that our customers don't have the ability to just take on every single price increase. In a retail environment, you're selling to a consumer who, yes, the consumer can always say, no, that's too much money for me, I'll go somewhere else. In a mining environment, we're capped by the market and the commodity prices that they have. So the customer can only take so much cost increase. And so they really push back on us, which meant we push back on our supply chain. So the overall cost increase was borne across the board by everyone throughout the chain. And we mitigated it as much as possible, but it didn't go away. It just kind of spread out smoothly.
Thank you. That was fantastic. Out of curiosity, to the extent you can disclose, and I'd ask Brandon the same question, what's your annual sourcing spend?
So it depends which part of the onion you're talking about, 'cause we're a messy, messy onion. But Komatsu Mining Technologies overall is about $6 billion revenue and about $2.3 billion in spend to make that up.
Okay.
For the Pittsburgh-based business, it's about $1.5 billion revenue and around $400 million in spend. When you talk about North America, U.S. spend, we're spending well over $1 billion just in the U.S. and U.S. suppliers, because about half of our supply chain is domestically focused. I made the joke beforehand, but we were so bad at globalizing in the 90s that we were behind the curve, so we were a little bit protected from tariffs. But it was still a big hit to take that across Komatsu Mining Technologies, it was well over $30-40 million in tariff that just came right off the balance sheet that we weren't able to pass on to our customers.
I'd be interested in your perspective too at American Eagle, and I think differently than Komatsu. You were better at globalization, and you've got factories all over the world. So what's your spend overall? Can you give us that picture?
Yeah, American Eagle does about $6 billion in revenue, and we import into the U.S. about $1.2 billion annually, and we import from about 14 different countries across the globe.
Okay, thanks. Brandon, you've spoken publicly about AI, and I was having a few conversations beforehand about AI. How can we not talk about it these days, right? But with respect to AI and layered data intelligence, you're already using that at American Eagle to make real-time decisions during this period of volatility. Can you talk to us about that? And for example, whether you're using it to shift freight modes or sourcing countries or shipping channels, and what kind of savings and benefit are you seeing from your ability to use AI already?
Yeah, no, so we were early adopters of kind of machine learning. So what we build out across the network is really kind of an AI forecast that kind of are predicting where the sales are going to occur from a consumer perspective for your even direct consumer and store orders. What we do with that then is you can think of kind of a giant machine running that's kind of always saying what the sales forecasts are, and then what we're doing is we're dynamically, as orders are being placed, we're dynamically rerouting them to where they need to go. So that could be kind of changing countries, that can be kind of changing what distribution center we're going to in the country. So it allows us to have a lot of opportunities because you've got that foundation. So then once you've got that foundation built, the scenario planning becomes a lot easier. So, you know, if a tariff gets announced that, you know, let's say Bangladesh is going to have a 20% tariff, but you now know that you can import into Bangladesh as a trade agreement with Canada and it's 0 tariff, you can redirect merchandise kind of on the fly in the supply chain to kind of optimize. But what the teams will do is essentially kind of similar to what they were describing there, where you look at total cost, you'll look at your kind of total cost of ownership and then look at where the demand is and redirect accordingly. But the scenario piece of it is pretty amazing on what you're able to do, because if you've got everything built, if you can think of a scenario, you can kind of optimize to whatever outcome you want. So if you want the lowest cost, if you want the fastest supply chain, you can kind of run scenarios to kind of divide that.
So in our other lives, Susanne and I are also M&A lawyers, so this is a new question for you. Did American Eagle grow mostly organically? Because what you see in companies that have grown inorganically and bolted on companies and systems is you don't have the agility that a company like American Eagle does. Is that right?
We've grown very much organically over the years. So actually, you know, kind of I would say over $5.5 billion of the $6 billion is from organic growth. So the American Eagle brand actually birthed another $1 billion brand called Aerie, which actually was born from a pair of women's boy briefs in an American Eagle store. Now it created a $1 billion brand. And then the Aerie brand actually from a viral TikTok legging created offline. So if you're in South Hills Village or Ross Park Mall in Pittsburgh, you can see an offline store. So that's kind of the athleisure brand. That's also almost $1 billion brand for AEO. We did purchase a brand, Todd Snyder. So I'm wearing Todd Snyder today, which is a high-end menswear brand that came with an acquisition of Tailgate a few years ago, which was a small-scale acquisition that we had made. But we've since grown that business significantly.
That's really fascinating. Moving back to Susanne, and you sort of stole my thunder with your opening remarks. You were talking about fairness and the processing of refunds, and you hear about these sums in the news, and what's the reality? Companies, are they seeing refunds? What's the legwork like on the ground? What could they have done with the Court of International Trade beforehand? Or is it really a case where you see these numbers and the administration likes to say that, you sure will be processing refunds, but are your clients seeing any of that?
We were very negative at the beginning. I just could not believe that any refunds would appear. But yes, we do see companies that have received refunds. Very surprising. The first time I heard it, which was now maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, they are coming in. We represent clients who have filed at the CIT, and some of them are now getting their refunds back, so we need to think about maybe withdrawing that suit. At the same time, there are others that know their claims are not even eligible to request a refund because there is no system to probably about, well, we just got an additional batch, so probably there's an additional 50 to 40% of claims that are not even eligible to request a refund yet. So, like I said, it will be interesting to see who will be at the end. And also, the government has appealed. They have not yet submitted a brief, so we don't know yet the basis of the appeal. And so it is feasible that CAPE, the portal that processes these claims, will come to stop, that there might be an injunction. Another uncertainty.
Mike, can you talk a little bit about what the environment like is in terms of in refunds at Komatsu?
Yeah, I was
going to
chime in actually and say I'm a success story for you. We have gotten some money back, which is good. So I was just as surprised as you were probably. I did not expect to get any money, and if I did, it was going to be years down the road, but it was quite quick. It is only on the money that has been through our freight forwarders, though, or the purchases that we controlled as a company that we've been able to recoup. Where it gets messy is where our suppliers charge tariffs onto us, but we didn't control that shipment into the U.S., and then you have to go to the supplier, and the supplier says, oh, well, I have to go to my supplier, and it's this big, long chain of trying to get that money back. Now, the good news is from our tariff impact, the majority of our tariffs were on shipments that we controlled, because our organization is a hub and spoke network that spans across China, Australia, India, South Africa, Europe, and the U.S. So because of that, we were the big behemoth that could kind of control those shipments. So that's where we've captured our IEEPA tariffs. Now, the other thing to point out, though, is IEEPA only made up about 30% of the tariffs that we paid. It was roughly 64% of our tariffs were driven by Section 232, and that's not a refundable tariff. So as much as my leadership always comes to me and says, great, thanks for the $2 million, where's the rest of it? I say, hey, you have to understand how much of our tariffs and where it came from last year, and lots of pie charts getting made and all that fun stuff.
Mike, going back to sort of AI, as you talk about this, for those in the room, it's not easy to build these tariff impact scenario models, and the data required and the level of data fidelity required is very high. So can you talk about, how you do that? I mean, it's very impressive, and how you're also implementing AI so that Mike can go to a CEO and say, look, it's going to cost us this much, or the tariff's this much. And by the way, the CEOs want that, the day it hits. And if you don't have these models ready to go, it's nearly impossible.
It's actually been pretty interesting to watch how the two, I'll even call them industries, the tariff industry and the AI industry, have grown up almost at the identical timing. because the first time tariffs were released, I had a team of analysts working on Power BIs, and after about 2 weeks of hardcore data crunching, they're like, look at this dashboard. And I was like, that's awesome. Now with the most recent changes, there's a new tool called Power Apps that it was literally just take our Excel spreadsheet from ACE that has all of our tariff data in this big messy thing, throw it in there and say, I want this dashboard. And it spit it right out, and it was beautiful, and it split it all up between our business units and showed trend lines and all these things. I'm like, that took us 2 weeks of probably 3 analysts making it back when this thing started.
And that was just
vendor. 2 years ago.
Okay, so that's an
it's
external.
It's a Microsoft product.
Okay, is it?
Yep.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't known about that yet.
Yeah.
Okay, so sort of moving on. How are you guys planning for unpredictability? Mike made a comment as we were preparing for this. He's given up planning because things are changing so quickly. So I'll throw it back to you. The environment's going to remain unpredictable, I think, going forward for quite a long time. So how can you advise companies and leaders and executives in the room to best prepare in terms of talent, system, processes, AI? I think we've heard it, but I'll let you go for it.
Yeah, to me, the biggest thing, and really, it's not all bad with tariffs. It has caused us to rethink as an organization how we do things. One of the biggest benefits in how we do prepare is by that deeper level understanding of our manufacturing base. So in a supply chain standpoint, we know our first level suppliers wonderfully. We have multi-year, multi-decade relationships with them. We meet with them regularly. We've known them. They know us. A lot of times it's looking in the mirror. But what this has forced us to do is better understand their procurement organizations, their supply chains, and then the third level supply chains and the fourth level supply chains. And I gave the example earlier, but for instance, in Mexico, I knew that my suppliers in Mexico were getting steel from somewhere, but I didn't really care where it was coming from. Now I know every single one of those Mexico suppliers, what mills their products are coming from, what countries it's coming from, and what heat treats, all those types of things. The data was there. We get mill certs with every single thing. I never looked up a mill cert in my life. But now I know that for every single structure so that I can recoup these tariffs, and it really forced us as an industry to do that. So even though I jokingly am like, I just give up with tariffs, it's because I'm comfortable in my team's understanding of the different levers that we can pull so that when the policy change comes, we go, what country does it affect? What's the numbers? What are our options? And then we can easily say, okay, that's off the board. Let's go over to this neck of the woods and move it there.
What's so interesting about what Mike said is it's all about like transparency, your supply chain transparency and visibility, which has been impossible for a lot of organizations to know second, third, fourth level deep. And going to the UFLPA, the Forced Labor Prevention Act, you have to know what's going on deep in your supply chain so that you can certify and tell the U.S. government, you're not buying any goods produced with forced labor. So it's an argument that some of the policy is working. What are your thoughts on it, Brandon?
You have to know your supply chain. You have to know it all the way down to where the cotton's from. Is basically from our perspective. So we definitely believe that uncertainty is here to stay. So understanding your supply chain is kind of a given now, because you don't know when there's going to be a tariff that might actually be based on an L2 or L3 supplier. So those are things that we definitely have a lot of partners that help us with that, and there's a lot of affidavits going around in the supply chain. So it's definitely something that our general belief though is that the administration is going to work to get the tariffs back to where the IEEPA was through the 301. So that's how we're kind of game theorying this of what they're trying to do, and we're going to prepare accordingly as if that's what's going to occur.
Susanne, you said enforcement is coming. So as I think about Mike and Brandon and what we all live through with these affidavits in terms of understanding your supply chain and knowing where your goods are coming from, there, as you said in your opening remarks, there hasn't been a lot of enforceability in terms of the UFLPA and some of these export and import laws. So what's your prediction in terms of what companies are going to be facing in terms of enforcement, and what are you seeing already?
I think we're at the beginning of the curve. And I used to be a trusting person, but I no longer think that a question that comes from customs is innocent. I always expect there to be more behind it, and usually, actually, that serves me and my client very well to always be on the lookout. I think when a simple, what we call a CF-28 comes in, they're not innocent. There is something in there probably that is being suspected. And yes, what sometimes we do, at that point you still have the opportunity to do a prior disclosure. We're doing a fair amount of prior disclosures, and frankly, very successfully. What it does is a prior disclosure, when done successfully, there's nothing worse than not doing a prior disclosure, which is to do a bad one. But because then you've put all the evidence out there, but you don't get the benefit of no penalties. You're then subject to pay and square on the tariffs, but none of the penalties will apply. So I think we already see an increase in these inquiries from customs. Sometimes it's not even an inquiry anymore. We see bills come. The first time we know that there is a demand is when the rate advance shows up in the form of a bill. So it's really often shoot and ask questions later. That is an unusual trend. We did not used to see that. We've always done some work at the CIT. I think there'll be more cases. We will be taken to the CIT. I think because there's a lot of money at issue. More because tariffs are higher, there's more money at issue, and so really when you have a good case, we recommend fighting it.
To the extent you guys can disclose, and I know you're probably working closely with your legal teams, have you seen, and I'm sure you're reporting to your audit committees on the enforcement trends and disclosures, have you started to see an uptick, or have your compliance controls been eminently successful?
Well, we are the highest level of CT-PAT, so kind of think of that as a fast pass through customs because of the number of imports that we're doing. We track every kind of stoppage at country of what was the country of origin, what was the product, what was the factory. So we try to really do some data collection on anything that happens, but we have seen upticks of enforcement, but not to the extremes that we probably expected. And I've spoke with many kind of people. We've got a lot of advisors and things like that. So there's definitely a revenue component of the administration and just the department that has kind of changed. So a lot of the enforcement is more around the revenue side. We're a little more concerned about what they're going to do with some of the trade programs, like something called a first sale program. That's where we're kind of concerned now. It's not so much on the enforcement because we believe we're doing everything above board, if that makes sense, but it's some of the things like the first sale programs, and is there risk to other policies that are out there that the administrations could go after as well.
Mike, what are you seeing?
So I think I'd agree there's not as much enforcement as I would expect. In my mind, comparing it to the Ukraine war when that happened, there was a whole bunch more interaction with our legal group on that and trying to make sure we were complying with those sanctions. And part of that was we had a business unit in Russia at the time. But it's there. Where I am seeing quite the uptick is the snake oil salesman company coming and saying, I can get you this product and it's tariff free. Don't worry about it. There's not a tariff to be paid on this one. We've crunched the numbers and we've talked to our legal, and don't worry, it's good. And those are the ones I am seeing quite an uptick of that, especially from Mexico. A lot of folks think they've cracked the code on how they can get around tariffs. And like I mentioned, our SLQDC, that's one where even though it is enticing to maybe say, hey, I can go and share this win, you just have to walk away because we know the policies, we know our products, we know that they are tariffable, what we're buying, and it's on us to make the right decisions in those situations.
Okay, so I think we're coming towards the end of our conversation. So if there's, I'm going to ask the panelists just one question, and then I'll let them all speak. But part of the mission of the World Affairs Council is also to educate our youth and people sort of coming up and going to high school and college. And we have a lot of business leaders and executives and community members in the room. So taking in mind that audience, what would you tell the older folks, and then what would you tell myself included, but also sort of, the younger generations in terms of how to prepare for this environment, both in terms of AI, what to study in school, that's a big topic right now. This isn't something I think we grew up with really, in depth, but it's going to be part of the future. So what advice would you give to the broader audience in general? Go for it.
I can go first. So the first thing that comes to mind to me is be prepared for craziness. I was saying beforehand, I'm kind of tired of the once in a career events because I've gone through the financial recession now. I went through COVID from a supply chain standpoint. Now I'm going through the biggest geopolitical war we've had maybe ever. I don't know what the history unit. But it's really taught me that, especially from a supply chain standpoint, the thing I love and hate at the same time about supply chain is that when times are great, we can't find enough capacity in the world and have enough suppliers in the world, and it's our fault that we don't have it. And when times are bad, we can't get low enough costs in the world and products on the shelf and inventory gone and off the books fast enough, and it's our fault. So whether the market is good or whether the market is bad, that's what we're dealing with supply chain. But it makes it that it's the most interesting, fun thing to do. It takes you all over the world. From an educational standpoint, when I go to schools and try and recruit kids, which is getting much harder to do as those entry-level jobs are being sucked up by AI, I can't go hire a supply chain manager out of school, but it's always to have the curiosity and understanding that in university and college, they are teaching you nothing that you're going to use in the business world. I always joke, I learned one thing at the Ohio State University, and that was how to use Excel, which isn't going to be applicable at all for these kids coming into the workforce. So it is much more having that openness, the understanding of the first 5 to 10 years of your career. You don't know what you don't know, and you're going to have to learn as you go. They did not teach me about SAP. They did not teach me contract negotiation. They did not teach me any of these things, but you pick it up as you go. And as long as you have that curiosity to learn and always better yourself and understand that horizontal movement is just as critical to your career as vertical movement is, that is the most important thing for anyone coming into industry, in my opinion.
Susanne?
Yes, I mean, as lawyers, we will be affected by AI significantly, maybe more so than some other industries. At the same time, I mean, the biggest issue or the biggest quality that a lawyer needs is just to have a good head on his or her shoulders, have common sense, have good social skills, be able to put yourself in the shoes of these person on the other side of the table, and that will continue. And so I do have some faith that, yes, the legal profession will change. I think it was the best choice I ever made in life. I'm actually a person.
Me too.
I like what I do. And I think there's still opportunities. They will be different, but I do have faith that there will be opportunities.
Yeah, but if I may, I mean, Susanne is right. I think legal is going to change a lot. But people like Susanne are going to have the most value to organizations who have the experience. And then going back to what Mike said, if you have a curiosity and a willingness to learn and move horizontally and just sort of work in a fast-paced environment and learn, you're going to get the experience you need such that I don't want to say you can deal with AI, but you'll be able to advise executives and boards and organizations, on how to best move forward. Brandon, off to you.
We live in amazing times, is what I would say. I'm an optimist, so I actually, if you look back at all technology actually creates jobs. Like, how many software developers were there 50 years ago? Or, you know what I mean? So I look at it through the lens. I completely agree with curiosity. I preach curiosity and passion as being kind of like the two skills that if you have that, you can do anything. So what do I think AI is going to do? AI is going to make decision velocity super quick. So anything that you want to know, you can know. It's just about asking the right questions and wanting to know it. So kind of you set a great example of how you were able to make decisions that much faster. So I think that's going to continue to happen. And I think, if you think of the current landscape, you're in a time where the abnormal and the unnormal is the normal. So your ability to make quick decisions and make them correct is going to be a key. And I think that kind of plays forward as well.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with you. I mean, everybody can be an expert now. We can, use AI. So that's where experience, judgment, curiosity, and communication skills, I think, will come in, as the most important for our youth. Okay, I think we're going to move on to audience questions now.
First, can we thank this panel? Wow, I didn't realize AI would be featured as prominently, but it is
we
so
do neither,
important.
actually.
Thank you. First question right here.
Thank you very much. I have a question about demand and the profit margin. So I have a question for Brandon and Mike. So technically, American Eagle should have, let's say, elastic demand, and Komatsu should have, let's say, inelastic demand. Yeah? So price sensitive, non-price sensitive. Yeah? So when tariff happens, so what do you sacrifice? Sales growth or profit margin?
So I'll start with this. So the one thing that I didn't mention is behind the scenes, whenever the tariff happens, what we actually said was, first and foremost, the reason people shop is our brand. So for apparel, it's a little different. So it's actually the brand that kind of separates it. So what we did is we actually doubled down and invested in our brand. We didn't pass along a lot of the costs, because apparel is one of the interesting industries where there's always overabundance of supply out there. It's really the brand that is what allows you to get a premium. So what we did is we just actually doubled down into our brand. So actually a lot of the brand campaigns that you saw in 2025 from American Eagle in 2026 were actually the result of kind of this intense focus on how do we make our brand that much more appealing to the end customer, because there is no the consumer's very price sensitive in the apparel industry.
So we also went the route of giving up profit margin in order to protect our customer base and keep our customer base. And some of that was driven by our own internal decisions and not thinking this policy is going to be forever. But the other side of it was also what our competition was doing. And so one of the things that we've seen, and this is speaking more to Komatsu's construction business, but one of our big rivals is obviously Caterpillar, and they've seen tremendous growth. Anyone can look at their quarterly statements from the AI data center world. We don't have engines that we manufacture that can subsidize our other businesses. They've chosen to use this big profit engine of theirs to subsidize their other businesses and not have tariffs impact. So because of that, in the marketplace, pricing hasn't increased as much to our customer base. On the mining side, we attempt to pass on tariffs in some form, but it can't be that entire amount, because like I said back at the beginning, for that business, commodity prices really set it. And so we could raise the prices. The customers, the mining companies, they just won't be able to buy it. They can't buy anything if they don't make any money. So that really capped what we could pass on and why the flow had to go back through the supply chain as well as us bear it.
It's great to hear how nimble the big companies are. And I know that one example is that, Bangladesh to Canada, but when you move to Canada and then the tariffs are raised on Canada, for small and a medium-sized business, that would be very difficult. And I'm wondering, what is the information now, Susanne, that you give to small and medium-sized companies, and whether trade organizations are helping?
There is a lot of information out there. I have a history of issuing alerts, and our alerts are practical. By now, I kind of have a sense of what kind of announcement will hit, like a lead balloon. For example, when the derivative steel directive came out in August of last year, I just could tell by then it probably hit you that this would be a surprise, that companies who never thought they'd be hit with the Section 232 steel tariff, that this would be huge and a significant impact. So this was one of the alerts that we issued. Also, there is a lot of good information out there on like trade organizations. We are personally a fan, and I can give you his email, a guy by the name of Mike Dankler, who is a legislative aide in Washington, and he publishes for free these weekly alerts and just summaries. I don't know when the man sleeps, but it's a wealth of information, and there are others. I'm sure you all have heard of trade organizations who publish good information all the time.
But Judge Baldwin, I think you're right, though. Big organizations can be nimble and agile, and I came out of technology and semiconductors. Guess what? We passed along the cost to our customers that were NVIDIA, Broadcom, Microsoft. When we were talking about whether the trade policy is positive, negative, it's interesting to see. It's big companies can play the game and mitigate it, but I think it's really hurting small and mid-sized businesses, especially in our region.
No, you're absolutely correct on that. It takes and that's why the smaller companies are taken by surprise. They never had the money, the funds, the foresight, whatever you want to call it, to invest in these compliance programs to begin with. And trust me, if you get hit with a forced labor claim, and you have not done the work before, it's too late.
On to the consumer, and pretty soon dollar stores will be $25 stores.
That's right. A lot of businesses that aren't the direct importer, there's not that transparency that he was kind of describing. That makes it really difficult. So a lot of small businesses that might be buying from a distributor or a wholesaler, it's not transparent on what tariff was actually paid on it, because they're buying it once it's been imported. So it creates a lot of uncertainty for sure.
And even if they do buy from the manufacturer overseas, the quantities are not like a bigger company. So is it really worth a trip to visit that company and do the kind of investigations that are now imperative?
Hi. Thank you very much. It was a very enlightening presentation. I'm still confused, though. I'm kidding. Tariffs have always been an issue and can you give us a number compared to 8-10 years ago? Is it twice as complicated, 5 times as much complicated, 1 bajillion times complicated? Because that is the part that I don't understand and I don't live with. From your perspective, how much more complicated is it now than 8-10 years ago?
I'll give you maybe an example. I think in our company, like, I mean, I'm talking very senior people, tariffs were not something that you ever really talked about it because it was a very steady process. It was, you paid and it was just built into the process. There was a team, no one knew who those people were. Now everyone knows who that team is. And so it's become infinitely more complicated and more of a vocal topic at the board level, whereas tariffs was really not something discussed at all. But it is a very complicated topic, and part of it is the uncertainty of it, and then the want for people that may not be educated in the topic, the communicating to them is also another thing of how do you communicate something when it's uncertainty. It creates a real internal challenge in an organization regardless of the size. In some cases, a bigger organizations, it's more difficult because you're so many stakeholders you're trying to communicate to, because everyone wants to just be informed and make the right decisions.
So is it a bajillion?
I would say maybe not a bajillion, but it may be 1,000 times more. But
I can tell you that we used to 20, 30 years ago, there was nobody, and at that point we were Cohen and Grigsby, who did trade work full time. There were maybe 3 of us who did some trade work. We did a lot of other contract work, etc., M&A work. Now we have a couple of people who pretty much do this full time. And I always tell my clients, when we are busy, you want to know, because then this is something you want to watch out for. And this is certainly an area we just can't even get enough attorneys to assist our clients in this area.
I think to quantify it for you, a good way to do that is just thinking of the Pittsburgh-based business, which is legacy product Joy Mining Machinery, if anyone knows Joy Mining Machinery. That business here in Pittsburgh has one full-time person now that they did not have before just to deal with tariff policy. And we do not file for tariffs. We do not pay tariffs directly. We have freight forwarders, third-party companies do all that technical work for us. We viewed it as a full-time headcount worth of person just to understand, communicate, analyze, capture, all of that. So that's the value to us is headcount, right? And we thought it was one headcount worth a person, worth of effort.
So I have a question, and this has been fascinating, but it's for Brandon. So American Eagle, it's more identifiable. I was in Ross Park Mall the other day. So if I walk into an American Eagle outfitter store, and I look at the price tag, that tag, and you folks have retailers all over the country, right? Mm-hmm. How quickly is what you guys are doing behind the scenes translated to what that price tag says?
Yeah. We don't change pricing that often, but the timing, your cycle time from the time an order leaves, you could probably change pricing about 90 days out, 60 to 90 days out, because there's something called a ticketing bureau. This is actually really detailed for you guys. So overseas, our vendors will actually call a ticketing bureau to order the tickets. So like for American Eagle, we have RFID enabled tickets. So there's actually a encoded reader in there in those tickets. So it's a little more fancy. But they about 90 days out, you can actually adjust ticket prices if you needed to.
Now, what happens after that thing is on? So
once it's on the water, that creates a. Once it's in the store, we rarely do this, but you can actually, reticket garments at the distribution centers or in stores. That's not something we like to do because it's labor intensive to take the ticket off of everyone and apply a new ticket. But it is something that someone could do. Many retailers will do that. Or if you ever go to a retailer and see a sticker over top of it, that's another thing that's done. So there's a lot of different techniques that are used. But yeah, it's there is some agility there. Obviously, if you're online and there's no pricing, you've got much more agility there. But when you've got a lot of our things, it's not only the price on the ticket of the item. You might have campaigns, promotions, all sorts of marketing that's tied to the pricing as well. So there's a lot that goes into behind the scenes on the pricing of goods.
So you'll take a hit on the profit side.
We made the strategic call to really not raise ticket prices. I'm not going to say that we didn't raise any prices on anything, but we're a value brand at heart. So when you walk into an American Eagle store, kind of, and this has been our DNA from day one. We want you to buy something and want you to feel like after you purchased it, whether it's a $40 pair of jeans or a $20 shirt, that you got a good deal on it and you never thought you paid too much. That's kind of our DNA. So we did not want to price gouge people, and we also didn't want to get into a situation from a brand perspective that if you raise your prices and then consumers aren't willing to pay, that you're walking into a store that says 70% off, because that's not good from a brand perspective. So we took a little bit of, not every brand took the same tack. Like luxury right now, a lot of them raised their prices significantly. You're seeing a big impact on luxury now because of that, but every brand took a different approach. We were just definitely, we're customer focused in everything that we do, and we believe value is a key.
So I would add my thanks so much for a fascinating conversation. So my question is really from a layman's point of view. It was my understanding that the administration's goal with tariffs was to essentially support American businesses. And, you know, obviously all of you have been doing all kinds of calisthenics in your respective businesses to adapt to this quickly changing and very uncertain landscape. And Susanne mentioned about talking with a, like the what are they called again? The people in Washington that
Lobbyists.
The lobbyists, right? So you mentioned about talking to the lobbyists for the first time. So I guess in kind of looking at it from a meta point of view, overall, do you feel that there are benefits that are coming through for businesses? You talked about really being super clear now. If you weren't before, you really know down to every single detail, like where the cotton came from, right? Or what plant that the steel came from. Are there clear benefits that you can point to? And for the smaller businesses, how are you guys like helping smaller businesses to advocate with their legislators to say what pieces, if any of this, are working for small businesses and what pieces really are not?
I can jump into that one. So from overall the positive aspects of it. So tariffs are a tool. As Susanne went over, they've been a tool forever, and they can definitely bring revenue in and cause us to rethink things. To me, it was a one-pronged tool that it should have been combined with multiple other things to truly bring back that American manufacturing. So for my role, for years have traveled all over the country visiting suppliers in every single state of this country. And I never went to a supplier before 2024 that said, I have all the labor that I need, I have all the equipment that I need, and I'm just waiting for work to come, right? So really, if the policy was focused on truly bringing American manufacturing back, it needed to have three things to it beyond just tariffs. So one, it also had to have an extreme investment in our people and educating them to be welders, machinists, mechanical technicians, all those things that no company can find. We also needed to incentivize businesses and give them the ability to go purchase the capital required to bring some of these industries back. An example of that is castings and forgings. America is still the number 3 country in the world when it comes to casting and forging capacity. That capacity is booked to the brim and has been booked to the brim for decades because our defense industry takes up the majority of that capacity. So if we really want to bring those raw material castings, forgings back to the U.S., we need the people to be able to run foundries, and we need the highly expensive foundry equipment to actually set these facilities up. When I go to foundries over in Asia, it feels like you could eat off the floor in some of them. When I go to them in the US, it's always 60, 70 years old. Kind of feels like you walked into an old movie, and you know, the state of the art is over in Asia, whether you like it or not. The state of the art should be in the US if we really want to bring that back. And then the last thing I think needed to be included in it for it to really take hold is to come up with a reward system for companies that do manufacturing in the U.S., especially when they do it for export. So a company like mine, our global distribution center is a little bit south of Pittsburgh, and historically it's a hub and spoke model. So we actually have a decent bit of sourcing in the U.S. That's why we have so much sourcing in the U.S. We have so much manufacturing in the U.S., and then it gets sent out to all of our regions. Now that you've added tariffs to the equation, we bring these components in, we manufacture them in our facilities. What we legacy send out gets shipped overseas. That's now becoming overly expensive for the region to afford. And so what it has forced us to do is break that system apart and create, we're starting small, but a two-hub model where you have China to feed the rest of the world and you have the U.S. to feed the U.S. business. And that is the more cost-effective thing for us to do, because when you look overall at China, they, yes, exported 20% less to the U.S. last year. So it worked, tariff policy, right? We bought less from China than the U.S. did, but China's overall exports went up 5% last year. So they got the capacity filled, but it wasn't from us. So the rest of the world is now running to fill the capacity that the U.S. used to fill ourselves. And so in doing that, we're not incentivizing the U.S. to continue to be that hub of the world that we send our state-of-the-art technology, our fully assembled products out because it's too expensive and the world's going elsewhere.
I can tell you that we do have clients who are now looking at manufacturing more seriously in the United States, and that this policy is a driver. Not that they may not otherwise come as well, but it's a point of discussion that, you know, make America great again, that, yeah, we're doing the right thing. I also remember, and this was like probably 2017, 2018, when all of this started, and one company telling me, we would love to source our parts down the road. It would be so much easier. The supply chain would be so much easier. It's not that we choose that, it's just not available. And so, yes, there are some hard realities, and this was just all came at once, and there was no time to adjust. And also, this policy is not, it's not refined. I think there are some industries we don't even want here. Because they're so dirty, and it's pollution, but the policy is not refined like that to distinguish with what we want, and there's some things we don't.
She said it perfectly, that it was a one-size-fits-all policy across all. I mean, honestly, there are many sectors of the economy that need to be protected. Pittsburgh should have been maybe protected for steel, but, you know, it's there's lots of things that are important to the United States that you need to produce here. There are other things that we do not want to produce here. I just think there has to be a differentiation between those. The current policies have no differentiation, as you kind of said there. They're flat. They do look more like a revenue pool, but they're also, you know, creating leverage. So, you know, who knows what that will happen? Time will tell. But there are definitely industries that we need to protect in the United States for sure.
I think we're starting to see some of that. I mean, we are starting to see in the technology industry some onshoring and manufacturing here in the U.S. But to Mike's point, talent is a problem in terms of laborers, engineers, you know, people to run the facilities, but financing too. You know, it takes tons, billions of dollars to build semiconductor factories or nuclear reactors like Westinghouse is going to do. And so I think we're starting to see some of the parts of the policy come together, like with the investment that, you know, Westinghouse and Dan Sumner just announced, you know, their loan program, $17.5 billion. That's because it takes $10 billion to build a reactor that we need in the United States for our energy, you know, security. So Susanne said maybe in 10 years, 20 years, you know, we'll look back and see if, you know, any of this was successful. But I think we're looking at that time horizon because of, you know, there's so much work to do. So we may well look back in 2040 and say some of this policy, in my opinion, was good, but it wasn't, I think, well architected, to Mike's excellent point at the beginning.
And I'll close the topic out with just the comment that every single time I come back from China, the first thing I do when I get off the plane is take a deep breath in.
Yeah.
Because it hurts being over there. And we don't want that. As much as we say we want that,
Yeah.
I didn't live in Pittsburgh in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and I'm glad I didn't when I go to China.
We have time for one last question over here.
So we have tariffs, increasing costs, and instability in rules, increasing risk. How much do you see of a reconfiguration of supply chains? You began to speak a little now in the last question about some onshoring or manufacturing. How do you see in your companies or in other companies that you observe in your sectors, countries being, changed, location from one thing or another? How much went out of Asia, or how much is being moved from China to India or to ASEAN or other places, Latin America?
Yeah, so we definitely kick the tires on India. The quality's it's just not there like you see in China and other Asian countries. One of the other benefits of tariffs beyond the understanding of our supply chain is the understanding of our networks. What historically was easier for us to just have these very messy maps of the world with these shipping lanes all over the place, we are absolutely simplifying that and getting it to a point where our manufacturing is occurring much closer to, or our supplier is much closer to our manufacturing, which is much closer to our customer. So it is having the effect of siloing in the world, but China continues to be the big behemoth when it comes to manufacturing, and that's where the world's going, more than doing their own make in these specific country areas. The one country that has a policy that is very aggressive, and I would say probably even more aggressive than the US when it comes to making your products in country, is India. But India doesn't have as much of a desire to be a global exporter as you would think. They have well over 1 billion people. I kind of go there and always think it has to be 2 billion. There's no way they can count all these people. But they often, and it even happened with the tariff policy, they said, hey, we export 2% to the U.S. Go ahead, charge us whatever tariffs you want. It doesn't affect us. They overall are much more concerned of becoming a manufacturing hub for their country. And that's kind of the mindset that a lot of these countries are going, is let's shrink those supply chains from what was these very messy webs all over the place.
Apparel is a little bit of a different supply chain because apparel actually is often the starter for manufacturing in countries. So if you think there's levels to it, obviously if you're doing advanced machine manufacturing, that's a more advanced economy, whereas apparel is normally a starting. Countries like Bangladesh, I've had the chance to visit, or India, Pakistan, Jordan. We're in many countries across Asia and the globe. Our goal is to kind of not have too much concentration in any one country, to be kind of globally diversified. There is a move more towards South America and other countries that have trade relations with the U.S., more Western Hemisphere is the way I would kind of describe it. But there's not really a push for the U.S. market simply because there's not needlecraft skills in the U.S. People don't know how to sew and things like that. So it's a little bit of a different equation in retail. But actually, a lot of times, the tech sector guys are normally following the retail guys because the retail has to move first, and then as the economy matures, then that's where some of the more advanced manufacturing comes.
Wonderful. Thank you again. Please join me in thanking our panel. Susanne, Mike, Brandon, Marie, thank you for moderating this terrific conversation. Thank you again to all of our partners, and especially to all of you for coming out tonight and engaging with us in this rich conversation. We'll be back with our Civic Futures speaker series in September. We'll be joined by James Story, a former ambassador to Venezuela, and we'll continue the conversation from September through December. There's a program at least once a month, so please stick with us. Now, time to get back to the World Cup. Thank you all for joining us. Take care.